We are delighted to welcome Eudelia Contreras, the CEO of Full Circle of Lake County, to TALTalks. Full Circle is a nonprofit powerhouse dedicated to empowering communities through a multifaceted approach that includes youth development, family support, immigrant services, and resource connections. Under Eudelia's dynamic leadership, Full Circle has become a catalyst for social change, advancing health, well-being, and equity for all. Their commitment to fostering holistic community development is creating a profound impact, uplifting the lives of countless individuals. Eudelia Contreras, drawing from a diverse background in both government and nonprofit leadership, has demonstrated a remarkable ability to bridge gaps and provide interpretation services, further strengthening the community's bonds. At TALTalks, we applaud the invaluable work of Full Circle of Lake County and Eudelia Contreras' vision for a more inclusive and empowered community. Together, we can aspire to a brighter, fairer future for all.
So yeah, I'm up in Leadville, Lake County, which is more than 10,000 feet elevation, and I've been there for about since '93. So I got there when I was in first grade, and I remember walking to one of the closer schools. It was actually a child care center. We didn't have any family here, didn't really know anybody, and my mom said, "We need to enroll you in school." And I said, "Oh, I already kind of know how to read and write. I think I'm good. I don't think I need to." And I was entering into the first grade. I didn't think I needed to go to school. So we get there, and at this time, especially in a mountain rural town, there isn't anybody that speaks our language or that looks like us. So that was very different than where I was coming from. We had come from Mexico to California. California, there was a little bit more diversity, but it was still interesting. California, I did kindergarten. My teacher did not speak Spanish. I did not speak any English, and I was held back from kindergarten because I didn't understand. And so all throughout school, I went through school thinking, I just am not smart enough, because if I failed kindergarten, what am I going to do in the higher grades? So, and that's also the messaging that I was getting from, because that wasn't explained to me or my parents, that it was a language barrier. So then that's the messaging that I just kept receiving, and I internalized that. And then comes all of these messages that we get from social media, television, family sometimes as well. So we get to Lake County, and it's snowing all of the time, a very different climate than what I'm used to. And I remember at a very young age doing interpretation for a lot of the people in our community. This is the first school that I went to in Lake County. My kids, when I went to parent conferences there, they were like, "Whoa, this school is that old, Mom?" I was like, "No, I'm not that old." But that was, it's cool to see kind of how, like, they're going to the same school that I went. But what was hard is that the students that I went to school with, they had all been there since kids. This was a small town, and I just didn't have any of those connections. So I was always trying to figure out, where do I make my connections? Teachers were a big part of this. We had two teachers at the time, Gloria Romero and Jerry Chavez. I remember them because they made such impact, and then Mrs. Smith in my life, with two of them speaking the language that I was speaking and looking like me, and then Mrs. Smith just being very welcoming. And always trying to encourage us. And at this time, it was also interesting because we had the white kids, we had the immigrant kids, mostly from Mexico, and then we had the Chicano population. And there was always a lot of, between our Chicano population and our immigrants, there's a lot of differences and fighting, and I could never really figure out what was going on. We looked like each other, and we seemed like we were going through the same barriers, but I just couldn't figure out what it was. And so now I understand the bigger picture of systemic, right? And I did make connections with a lot of amazing people that I still see now as adults, and I have connections with. And so that was my biggest takeaway of how did I from being held back in kindergarten, not speaking the language, what were some of those things that got me through to where I am today? So like I was saying, doing a lot of interpretation, learning about so many different things. I remember doing interpretation for somebody that was in jail one time, as a very young kid, like I said, the start of like the 3rd grade. And I didn't know at the time that I was doing language justice. My family, when we got to Leadville a few years later, my parents separated, and so that was very traumatic for me because all of our family just kind of disappeared. So now I'm starting to understand trauma and how that affects students, even if it happens as when they're babies, how that affects and it shows up later in life. So that's one of my biggest focuses at the organization that I am now, because we do direct service and we have the mentoring program that starts in 4th and 5th grade, and then we also all the way up to high school. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, great, we have these programs that have been done all the time because we're in the mountains and we should be camping and fishing. That's great, but a lot of us Hispanic people we're not really interested in that. So then the kids are like, I don't want to go camping, it's cold and it's gross and I don't want to do it. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, what are the programs that will get our youth involved? And what are the things that are the things that they will join? I'm still very connected to my culture. Quinceañeras, so many kids show up at the quinceañeras, the Spanish-speaking kids. It is packed. So then, great, that should be, it's such a clear message right there. Dancing, music, and food. That's what do we create? Some kind of center. We don't even have a rec center up in Lake County right now. Family ties, going back home to Mexico is one of my favorite things, and my kids as well. We immerse ourselves in our culture, and that's what they say. They say, we all speak the same language here. There's no differences. And a lot of the youth that we work with, because a lot of us are from the same town back in Mexico, it's called Chanchihuitas, Zacatecas, and I see them in December. I see them all there, their parents, and that's just really cool. So also trying to figure out, how do we continue this so we don't forget our culture either? Because then we also, what happens too is we run into this belonging sense. So right now we don't want to speak our language, we want to look really white. So how do we make sure that that doesn't happen? So before the pandemic, about 2 years before the pandemic, I was invited to run for a school board. Again, I come from a family that my mom is a housekeeper and my father is a construction worker. I'm invited and I'm like, yeah, sure, I guess it would be good, right, for our school and the kids. Our community is, as a whole, is 30% POC, people of color or Hispanic, and then in the school it really changes, it's 70% Latinos. And we didn't have anybody on the school board that was a person of color or any administration ever. So I did it, and then COVID hit. That was the hardest thing I had ever done. I never knew what it was like to be on a board. I didn't even know about motions and how do you do this. So that was another eye-opener for me. Again, now we need to have some kind of path for folks that want to go into these positions. We hear it all the time, right? We need more people of color, BIPOC people in leadership positions. Okay, great. And then what's the path? Well, how do you do that? I'm very proud to be a co-founder of a coalition on CAP that's Líderes Latinoamericanos, and that's what we're doing in that group. We're focus on if people want to run for school board or commissioners, we support them, get the information they need as to even to practice what those meetings look like. Because sometimes in those meetings, you don't even know, like, can I get up and go to the bathroom? Do I have to make a motion? Like, what has to happen here? I remember so clearly, there was a mother, she spoke the language, she is from here, from this country, and she wanted to come in and advocate for her child in the school meeting. She was so nervous, she started to break down, tears, and that was one of my last meetings as I was stepping down. I said, here's a clear sign that these meetings still aren't welcome. These are very structured for a certain person, and it's not who we're trying to engage. And so one of the other things through the work that I've done is community organizing. Something that I'm very proud of in Lake County, a lot of folks, especially Spanish speakers, live in manufactured home parks that sit outside of city limits. So they have very little access to any parks or to do the walking and all of the things that are supposed to be so good for us. And in those manufactured home parks, there aren't very many amenities already. And they're owned by other people, you always have to pay space rent. So one of the things that we said is something that would be so helpful is if these parks, they were resident owned. And one of them came up for sale in the community, and it was within city limits. It was one of the ones that's in city limits. And we thought, if this goes on the market, it's going to sell. There's huge houses, $500,000 houses going up next door. They're not going to keep it apart. They're going to displace all of these folks. And we have never done any community organizing there. What was helpful is that myself and another person from another organization had personal connections, personal relationships with the folks there. That's when they started to trust us, because there was a person that would come in and give them information, and they were like, we don't know, it's this guy with this hippie hair, I don't know what he's trying to do. And so that's another clear sign of relationship building, to get people to trust you. And that is how we were able to organize, and now the residents are owners of their community, and they make their own rules, and they don't have to have space rent increases every year. So that was really good. But yeah, that's my next step at Full Circle, is trying to figure out, unfortunately we have a lot of youth that are getting into very heavy very dangerous drugs and alcohol, younger and younger. In my work that I do, I'm also an interpreter for human services, mostly child welfare. And a lot of cases there's persons using fentanyl, things that I haven't really ever heard before as young as 13 years old. So that is my next at Full Circle as CEO, new CEO. I've never been in a position like this, is trying to figure out what will get these the youth that are really struggling, that don't have any kind of connections to anything, to our programs, and meet them where they're at and see what people are interested in.